Welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show, Defying Gravity so your team can soar at altitude, with host Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach Randy Swaim.
Okay. Well, hello. This is Executive Coach Randy Swaim, founder of Coaching for Relevance, and welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show that brings aspects about leading teams in a challenging and unpredictable environment. And I will say this, that I'm very honored today to have my friend and colleague Stephen Wood as a guest on the show. I know we are fellow colleagues and fellow neuroscience people, and I know he's going to be bringing some of that over a few of our episodes as we go forward. So very honored to have him here. And I know he's from Australia, so Steve, it's an honor to have you here, and I'd love to have you take just a few minutes and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Mandy. And of course, the other thing we have in common is that we're both passionate about flying. So
there you go. That is true.
Yeah.
And nothing is more unpredictable than flying. That's for sure.
You really need to have your wits about you.
Yep.
So as you said, I'm in Sydney, Australia. I've spent most of my life in the TV game as the executive producer in mainly the sport area, and I got a lot of insights into sport and sporting people, and that's when my interest became triggered in neuroscience to really understand what pushed people to achieve outstanding results. But at the same time, I met people in the sporting area that didn't have as much success, and I was interested to know what was going on for them. And that's really what started my journey down this path.
Wow, cool. And I tell you what, very often when you're talking about sports, not everything is always predictable. That's for sure. And so, yeah, it's unique for sure.
Well, absolutely. And it doesn't matter what sport you're in, whether you're driving a racing car, whether you're running on a track field, whether you're out in the ocean competing, swimming or paddling. There's always things that are going to come up that you can't plan for.
Yep, and that is true. And really, that's kind of the heart of our of my radio show here, and a lot of what I do, and a lot of what's related to my organizational maneuverability concept. Because not everything, and as you said correctly, even in flying, not everything is predictable. Not everything always fits just a rote academic aspect of it. And so when you're talking about leading teams or flying an airplane or being in athletics, guess what? You got to be aware of some things that I know you're going to bring today. Some very key things that leaders have to be aware of.
Yeah, and I know, Randy, one of the things that you're sort of passionate about is that you can learn certain skills, and you can take those skills to the workplace, to the sporting field, to any endeavor, to the aeroplane. But there's going to be times when things don't match with that skill, that they're outside that frame. And that's the time that you've got to make a choice about how you find a solution.
And it's interesting with what you said too, because it's making the right decision for that situation. I can't tell you how many times I've heard pilot instructors along the journey say, well, it should have been like this. Well, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Are you aware of that and all that? And I know a lot of this is aligned with kind of what you're going to bring today.
Yeah. And look, I know that we've briefly spoken about this, but if we could just take a minute, because when I learned to fly, that was like a pivotal time in my life. Although I was only 18 or 19 at the time. I didn't really understand the gravitas of it all. But
yeah,
when that flying instructor hopped out of the aeroplane and closed the door and said, "Off you go by yourself," a whole lot of things rushed through my mind.
Yeah.
Have I got the skills? Am I ready? What happens if something goes wrong?
Yeah.
He closed the door, and felt I didn't have a choice. And I pushed the throttle forward, and away I went. And everything came together, and I'm here to tell the story. But the thing that I do reflect back on now is that quite often we make the mistake that we don't have the skills, or we're not ready. I haven't got the experience. I don't have the education. I come from the wrong side of town. We make all these excuses about not being able to move forward. But the reality is that when we put ourselves in that seat and we've got to do it, we find this intelligence, if you want to call it, and solutions from that we need.
You know what? And you're absolutely right. And aviation is one aspect of that. One of the things that I tell people is, to what extent have you really developed that student? And that doesn't mean they're perfect. Doesn't mean they're ready for their private license yet. But to what extent have you truly prepared them? And also, when you're leading your teams as a leader, to what extent are you truly developing and preparing your team to be able to be successful when not everything fits this one picture kind of thing? And so it's very aligned with what you're bringing today. That's for sure.
So I thought that we might just start off by, I think is like really the beginning of this understanding of this journey, and that is trying to understand the conscious and the subconscious mind. So if we start off with the conscious mind, and very briefly for people, the conscious mind is all about our five senses, our sight, sound, smell, taste, touch.
Yeah.
It's like that's the input that we get into our conscious mind so that we can make decisions. As we go through the day, we're receiving information, whether it's, from any of those five senses, from our environment, from our colleagues. And over time, when anything is ever repeated, it gradually seeps down into the subconscious. But probably the thing that people don't understand is that there's this talk about, we only use 10% of our brain, and, our brain is so powerful. That the conscious mind is not really that powerful. It has like a bit of a safety switch so it doesn't get overloaded. It can only deal with about 40 bits of information a second. And to put that in common man speak, 40 bits is equivalent to about a 5-letter word. So your mind can deal with 40 bits, which if you were on a computer would, probably write Randy or Steve.
Yeah.
So people say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure about that." They say, I can, because it's not that powerful. People say, "Well, I can do more than one thing at once. I can drive the car and talk on the phone." But as we all know, driving a car, for instance, is not a conscious decision. It was when we first started to learn to drive. How on earth are we ever going to drive the car? But now we hop in the car and we can go from point A to point B and not even understand how we got there. And you could be talking on the phone. But if you're traveling from A to B the way you normally do and it's on autopilot, and all of a sudden there's a road closed sign and there's a detour, you go, "Oh my God, where am I going now?" And the people on the phone, you go, "Sorry, I've got to call you back. I don't know where I am. I've got to get around this detour." So that's a good way of understanding how the conscious mind is not that powerful. When we get to the subconscious mind, however, it's like 1,000,000 times more powerful. It's like 40 million bits of information. So how do we understand that? Well, when you're asleep at night, it's your subconscious mind that's keeping your heart pumping and keeping you breathing as you go through the day. Everything's working without you having to think about it. But it's also the hard drive. It's like an archive of everything that you've ever known or learned.
Yeah.
And it stores all that information and all those experiences that we've had through life. So the interesting information here that I try to get people to understand is that 95% of our day is spent in this part of the mind, the subconscious mind, where things are automated.
Mm-hmm.
And people go, well, I don't know where you got your information from, but I don't think that applies to me. And I say, okay, just think about from the time you wake up in the morning, the alarm clock goes off,
Mm-hmm.
you go to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you get dressed,
Mm-hmm.
you hop in the car or the bus or the train, you go to work, you know what your job is, you know the people in that organisation that you're going to get on with, that are cooperative, the ones that are going to be a bit have a little bit of pushback. You know where you're going to. I don't know about in America, but people love to have a cup of coffee in the morning. Where you're going to get your cup of coffee from, and then the process happens in the afternoon, and then you finish your day off. You go home to your partner, your wife, or whatever that environment is, and so you can see that we're doing the same things day in, day out, but we're expecting some change to happen.
And what's interesting, a lot of times when somebody says they expect some change to happen in their brains, when you're talking about those two aspects of our brains, what so many people do is they expect the change to be exactly something they would expect, and to bring a picture that is with their comfort level. And it's like, you know what? Not always.
No. And it's interesting you talk about comfort level, because part of a lot of the subconscious mind programming has happened in those first 7 years of childhood. I think this is a couple of really important things to get across, so that people sort of have an understanding of what's going on in their daily life, is that most of the things that we think about or have a perspective about come from our childhood. And in those first 7 years, our brain's in what they call theta or alpha or theta mode.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that, we still experience that as an adult, and it's the time when we go to bed at night, we've got our head on the pillow and we're in that half awake, half asleep state. That's theta or alpha mode. And so kids up to the age of 7, although they're running around and they're going crazy and how are we going to control their mind is in this half awake, half asleep, and all they're doing is just recording everything that they see in their environment.
Mm-hmm.
Not only what mum and dad and the school teachers are teaching them, but what they're observing, behavior, how to interact with other people. All this gets recorded, and then, of course, becomes a platform for us to use as we get older and we move into adulthood. And quite often you can pick this up when you have a conversation with somebody in the workplace, when they get challenged and they might say, you know what, I'm no good at maths, I'm no good at writing, I'm no good at public speaking, I'd never be able to do that. And of course, none of that is true.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a belief or a memory that we've picked up at some point earlier in our life.
And it's interesting too, because with exactly what you're saying there, because you're absolutely right, those assumptions are not always true, and in fact, they're very rarely true, if at all. And when you're talking about leading your team, probably particularly in a challenging environment or whatever, how are you going to really develop your team to overcome some of that? And, when somebody comes in and they're showing you they don't believe they can get there, and, are you asking the right questions that helps them get to sense for why, what makes you feel that way, what makes you say that or think that, but also, do they sense your belief in them, kind of thing, even apart from that. And when you're talking about leading teams in that, to what extent are you really preparing your people for those unexpected situations where don't always fit just the rote picture and things? And so it's just kind of one aspect of it that's very interesting with what you said.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges with going into organisations, and that's obviously what you do, and that's what I do, and to try and show people, what's going on, and quite often to teach them, I find that teaching people another skill, that can be overwhelming for people sometimes too, if they don't understand the underlying cause of why I feel this way. Why do I feel like I can't? It doesn't matter what I learn. I never feel as though I'll be a great leader, or because as we started off, you can have the skill, but there's something else missing for a lot of people. And in my experience, and neuroscience tells us this, that we've got to track it back to that early period and unwind it from there. But I don't think you need hours and hours of
No.
It is hours of therapy. It's just like this is what happened. The really interesting point for me, where I talk to people about this, and I say, this is how you've got your understanding of how to move through life. It's come from early childhood. But the amazing thing is that, those beliefs and thoughts and habits and the results you're getting, they're not yours, because at 7, you didn't make the decision about how you were going to program. They came from your parents, they came from teachers, they came from relatives, they came from everybody that you were interacted with in that. And of course, we all remember some great experiences from when we were kids. It's not all about being bad, because there's some really joyful moments and memories that we have from being a child.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the other thing, to put all this in perspective, because sometimes people get a little bit overloaded, and I use the example about driving the car.
Yeah.
The great thing about the subconscious mind is that it gives us the ability where although we might be operating on autopilot, it gives us the ability that every time we hop in a car, we don't have to learn how to drive it, or every time we go to a friend's place, we don't have to look up how to get there. I mean, there's great advantages about having these memories and these recordings in our subconscious mind to how to get through life, because we'd be worn out if we had to learn these processes every time. I think the secret is that we've got to become conscious of what things we're doing on a daily basis that are not serving us.
And it's interesting, because when you talk about leadership and leading people and leading your teams, very aligned with what you just said. One of the skills that true leaders have to adapt in reality is asking the right questions to help the person develop within themselves. And a lot of people, that means, okay, ask a question that you can give me an academic answer for. No, that's not what it is. Very often it's asking those questions that don't have a definitive answer to it, that they can kind of experience within themselves. I know with pilots, and this is very aligned with kind of what you're talking about. But one of the questions I've asked with a lot of pilots when they get their first jet certification or something like that, or go through training, one of the things that I'll ask them, I said, well, I'll tell you what, give some thought to this as you leave. I said, 6 months down the road on a flight, if the most unexpected thing comes on the scene that day that you would have never predicted, what might it be like?
Yeah.
And if so, what are you going to do? Kind of thing. And it just sort of gets them sort of thinking a little bit about that, where it's not just in that rote stuff that you're talking about, but when you're talking about developing your people, your team, whatever, that's a key aspect of learning to ask those right questions that really make your people develop and really explore into that and start to feel kind of who they really are and what they would really do and why. And it's kind of aligned with that neuroscience aspect of it for sure.
Yeah. I suppose just to bring it back to flying again, because one of the things that and I don't want to go down a negative path here, but I don't know whether you'd have it in America, but here I think it used to be called the Crash Magazine. It was like a publication put out by
okay.
Aviation Safety Bureau about analysing what went wrong in an aircraft accident. And it always surprises me that you have airline pilots that fly for a career. They fly every day. They know what to do, but they still have that checklist to make sure that everything is everything is right. Otherwise, probably if they relied on their memory, there might be a chance they might skip over something. You'd be able to add something to that, but I think that's relevant in just double checking that they could memorize the checklist, but what happens if something isn't quite right?
Yep. And what are you going to do about it? And is that really the right thing to do? And what defines that? Whether you're leading a team in a particular environment, or whether you're leading a flight crew as a pilot or whatever, all of that brings, because some of the stuff you're talking to the surface. And are you really using that correctly? Are you using that to really bring radical results of safety and success to your team or your flight crew or whatever, and the passengers? Or are you missing something? And that's a key part of this. No two ways about it. And that's true of leading any team anywhere.
I think once again we keep on bringing it back to flying, but
that's okay.
It happens in organisations as well, and
it does.
Another part, another sort of window into the subconscious mind is that once we've got all these programs running, they also give us a perspective around what we're seeing in our environment. So quite often, you've got a senior captain, and you've got co-pilot, but it happens in an organisation, a manager, an employee, or a senior executive and a department manager, and they have a perspective about what that person is. Are they going to get on with them? Do they like them? Are they going to cooperate? And I think you'll understand this, is that a lot of aircraft accidents have happened because someone in the cockpit has thought that the captain was in charge, or they couldn't speak to the captain because they were too domineering, or that had a bad experience with them before and been shut down. And so that's when people go on this autopilot of this person is this way, and that's that it's black and white. And of course, that's not the case.
And it's interesting too with what you're saying too, even on organizational teams, because if you're coming across as sort of a high power distant culture in what you're doing and how you're interacting with your people, are there times when you got to make the call? Yep. But you know what? There's other times where you want to maybe ask the right question or something that your people all of a sudden reach dramatic results. And I remember I was a site manager at Griffiths Air Force Base for Flight International. Oh, this was quite a few years ago. I'm talking probably 35 years ago. But I was standing there one time and I could hear, because we would just finished up a team meeting. So there were 13 of us, pilots, mechanics, and electronic warfare expert and all that kind of stuff, and me. And I could tell that their conversation, as they were just chatting, was going to a good place.
Yeah.
And one of the guys was going to sit down at the desk and make a few notes and stuff. And he did. But as he got halfway down, he froze because he knew the boss was in the room. And he just looked up like this. And literally all I did was I winked and I nodded to him. And he smiled and sat down and made some notes and stuff like that. But it's just, to what extent are you really developing your people so that your team gets dramatic results in ways that, and yes, it's partly in your development of them and you're leading them truthfully. But a lot of that, like you said, a lot of aspects get in the way in aircraft accidents, and it's unfortunate, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so just sort of continuing on that theme, you can understand that if you've got, in any organization, if you've got 50, 100, 150 people that have all had different upbringings, different experiences as children.
And they all have, for sure. In one sense.
So they've all got different perspectives. And as a manager, your job is to try and bring all these people together so they've got a common focus.
Synergy,
But it can be challenging sometimes because people, are so entrenched in what they believe is right and wrong, or and of course it's not. It's real to them, but it's if they could just understand that it's their perspective that they've had really programmed into them, and that if they could just stop and just open up, take the helicopter view, if you want another.
There you go.
Just take the helicopter view and go, what questions do I need to ask, or how can I grow, or is this attitude or perspective that I've got keeping me stuck? Where is it I really want to go? And
that's right.
How can I facilitate that?
And that's where, as leaders, you got to lead and model that in your team, but it's something you also got to bring to yourself in your awareness of it. And in my leadership, to what way am I getting that stuck, or am I really growing? Am I really making something on this? And all of that is sort of part of that. That's for sure. Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a good point. I know we're getting close to the end here of our time, Steve, and a great point. I know we're going to be on for maybe another 4 sessions and stuff. I'm honored to have you here. But I will say that we'll look forward to that. I'll welcome you to be on. And but let me just say this: we got about a minute and a half left and stuff. So anything you'd like to just share as you close out, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one too. Very good points that you brought out today.
Look, if there's one thing that I'd probably leave everyone with is that I could go down. I don't want to go down a longer path here, but when we take a bigger view of what's happening in the world at the moment, we've got a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of people struggling, and people want to sort of continue to make a step forward. And my advice is that you just got to take some time out of your day and just think about what is it that's serving you. What is it that, where is that stuckness coming from, and how can you change your perspective or the way you think about things that can free you up.
Steve, that's a great point, a great conclusion point, and it's something that all of us need to be thinking about with ourselves and with the people around us. No two ways about it. So you have my compliments on that. Well, listen, I know it's going to be great to see you next on the next episode, Steve. It's an honor to have you here. I really appreciate our colleague relationship and our new friend relationship too. But we'll look forward to having you on the next episode. And for all those listening, again, just honored to be with the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show and bringing insights that can help other people improve as we go forward and reach their radical results. So I know what it's like to live your dream. I think Steve probably does too. But we want to help other people do the same thing in their mind. So honored to have Steve on. We'll look forward to the next show. And thank you all for listening.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.